All right, we're about a minute or two away from starting. Hi, everyone. All right. Let's give everybody 1 or 2 more minutes to join before we get started, but thank you for coming. All right. We're going to get started. Hey, everyone. It's Coach Matt here. It's about a minute after 5. Thank you for joining. Today's webinar is titled How Not to Fear Thanksgiving Dinner. And, well, we're going to get into why I created it, but I created it because, there's someone else joining. We can restart there. Hang on. Okay. Someone's coming in and out. We'll give everybody, it's only 5:01. We'll give everybody, let's give them 2 or 3 more minutes to join just in case. Huh? Sorry, I'll back up and repeat that. You all can use the chat to ask questions if you like. And yeah, we'll get to it shortly.
Okay, we still have a few more people coming in, so we're gonna get started in about another minute or two. We'll get started. Hi, everyone. Cool. If you're just joining, you can use the chat to say hello, and you can use the questions feature on the right to ask questions, which I'll definitely get to at the end. And thank you for joining. All right, so it's a couple minutes past 5, so let's get this webinar started. Thank you for attending, everyone. So I'm Coach Matt, and today we're going to talk about how not to fear Thanksgiving dinner, which of course applies to other holidays and the entire holiday season. Over the years, I've coached a lot of people on nutrition, and the holidays can be rough, which we're going to get into for some people. So they don't have to be. That's why I made this webinar, and I want to thank you for joining before we start. And with that said, let's hop right into it. So I'm going to begin by sharing my screen and pop in the deck. So y'all should be able to see that. Okay. And let's go here. And let's begin. Okay. Can everybody see that, by the way? If you can't see that those slides, just pop a note in the chat and let me know. But otherwise, I'm going to assume that you can see the deck, and we're going to keep rolling forward. Okay. Cool. So how not to fear Thanksgiving dinner. All right. So the 4 key concepts that I'm going to hit on as we go through this webinar are consistency, inclusion, individuality, and the journey. So let's take those one by one. Okay. Consistency is my 4 key concepts that I work on with clients on. This is number 1, right? So I've written here the best diet or exercise plan or whatever it is that you're trying to do is the one that you can stick to and which supports your goals. Okay. This is super important. And we're going to see this as we move through the rest of the deck. There are many, many, many diets out there that fail to be adhered to because people can't stay consistent with them. And as it pertains to the holidays, as you'll see, they're often unrealistic, but they don't have to be. Okay. The next one is inclusion, right? So they're related. There's a little crossover here, but it's just completely unrealistic to think that you can't have a piece of dessert on your holidays for most people. Now, for some people, which we'll get into, it could be an emotional trigger here or there, but generally speaking, most diets are if there's inclusion on one side of the spectrum and restriction on the other, most diets are far too to the right on restrictive side. So inclusion is a key concept that most diets miss. Okay. Individuality. In keeping with this theme, there is no such thing as one diet that works for everyone. That's why it's almost impossible to go through your holidays following some plan that someone has written for you that doesn't actually apply to you specifically. Okay. So individuality is a key concept that we're going to explore a little deeper as we move forward. And it involves more than just this. Also, it involves being non-judgmental. Okay. So it means that, as we'll show some examples soon, that if you eat, just because you ate something yesterday doesn't mean it's going to work again for you tomorrow, right? So that's fluid. And just because somebody wrote a diet book that worked for a few thousand people doesn't mean it's going to work for you exactly the same way. Okay. All right. Next, the journey. This is my 4th and maybe my favorite concept. Your health is a journey. It has obstacles, turning points, and boring parts, but no finish line. Okay. So this is a big picture concept that helps frame things, particularly holidays, right? So it's not the case that if you go to a Thanksgiving or Christmas meal or any holiday meal or any wedding or any other social event, that somehow is like the end of your journey or your race. It's not even a race, the end of your journey or the end of your health, progress. That's just not the case, right? So these things like holidays, like Thanksgiving, They're a part of the journey, and we're going to see why. Okay. So moving on. Those are the 4 key concepts that I just wanted to start the show with. And to repeat them again: consistency, inclusion, individuality, and the journey. Really, there are just not too many people talking about these things. They don't make bestsellers on Amazon. They don't make viral TikTok videos, or at least I haven't quite figured that out yet, but hopefully I will. But they do work, right? So when you apply these principles, and we're going to get into some specific applications, they work. Okay. All right. Next. Okay, big concept here. There is no such thing as going off track. Okay. This is a huge one for the holidays. All right. So this is a myth that I just want to bust right off the bat, right? These are some false notions that go along with this going off track mentality, right? That you're supposed to be perfect, whatever that means. That there's something bad about gaining a couple of pounds over the holiday necessarily, or any time of year. It's just not true, right? I always tell my clients that rather than trying to be the same weight every day, which is impossible, you want to be in a healthy weight window, right? Up and down a little bit, 1, 2, 3 pounds. That's totally normal. And around a holiday, could be even 5 pounds or more. Okay. The notion that you can't break some rule that you've been adhering to, unless it's a rule that your doctor gave you, of course, but, or some streak, like, I haven't eaten bread in, 30 days and I just like really want to have it this Thanksgiving, but I can't because it wouldn't break my streak. That might be true for you if the streak, depending on how important the streak is, but the notion that you can't is not true in theory, in reality. The other one, this is a big one, that your identity is tied to sticking to some plan. Okay. So that is false, right? So you are not, whatever diet you want to follow is great as long as it's working for you, but that doesn't define who you are, right? So we won't get into dietary debate on this webinar because we're talking about how to survive and not to fear the holidays, but knowing that you're not going to change your identity based on what you eat at Thanksgiving, it might be helpful. Okay. So instead of those kinds of things, I ask you to consider this, right? Rather than thinking that you can go off track and never get back on, the truth of the matter is there's only one track, right? And holidays are a part of that track, right? So the track is life. Holidays and joyous occasions and sad ones are a part of life. The other truth about perfection is that you are already perfect exactly the way you are, right? That, I don't know many things to be true, but that is true. I'm just telling you right now, okay? And the other thing that I would like you to consider is that there is a way to set realistic expectations around food and weight during the holidays, which we are going to get into. So I'm beginning the webinar by trying to reframe things for you. I promise we're going to get into some specifics. So hang tight. Okay. What if we treated off the wagon periods as a natural and normal part of the entire experience of change and growth? Just think about that. Okay. Moving on. Another myth we're going to bust real quick. There is no such thing as a good or a bad food. Okay. Now, as a health coach, some people like to challenge me on that. Like, Matt, what about Oreos or Snickers or McDonald's cheeseburgers? Okay. I'm telling you right now, you heard it from me. There's no such thing as a good or a bad food, right? This is not about judgment. As I said before, non-judgment. You see the gavel there, right? Consider this. If you were actually starving, like on a desert island, and then someone handed you a Snickers bar, that would be really good in that moment, right? And if you are allergic or sensitive to something that doesn't agree with you, no matter what it is, like kale, for example, if that doesn't agree with you, then it's not good for you, right? And the other notion, of course, is that too much of anything will eventually be bad for you. So you could eat apples all day long every day, but eventually if you did that, you would get sick because you would be missing several key, nutrients. Okay? So inherently, foods are neither good nor bad by themselves. That's us putting the judgment on them. This is a key concept because there's a lot of good, bad judgment going on around food that we are going to get into as it pertains to Thanksgiving, right? Instead, I'd rather you think about or suggest that you think about food in the following ways, right? Or, sorry, consider this when it comes to judgment. This is what judgment can do to you when you do this in your head around food. It can make you very confused about what to eat. It can lead to fighting, right? People get like staunchly like firm, like in one camp or another, like, oh, you have to eat this way or that way. You see it all over Instagram and other platforms. It can ultimately, it makes you feel either like a failure or ashamed, or it leads to you not being able to stick to whatever diet you've been trying to stick to because it's inflexible. Okay, so the key question is not whether or not the food is good or bad. It's, is it good for you? I said that in the last slide, right? This is the only thing that matters. Okay. When I work with people in my coaching programs, that's what we figure out, right? So of course we have some ideas of what might be good for you, but you have to test, you have to tinker, you have to try things. And like I said earlier, just because you've been eating something that you thought has been working for you for years, doesn't mean it's going to continue to do so for you. So you always have to be testing. That's what tinkering means. Okay. All right, moving on. Again, there is no one diet that works for everyone. So just to reiterate this point, if there was one diet that worked for everyone, we wouldn't have a diet industry. Unfortunately, some of the stuff out there is very predatory and confusing. I'm here today to try to relieve you of that, to make it less confusing. There is some good information out there. That's why I'm tying this back to the good, bad, inflexible, flexible thing. You want to seek out nutritional advice from people who don't use absolute language, from people who are flexible to finding out what works for you. If someone asks me, Matt, what do I think of broccoli or bread or milk or whatever the case may be, I almost always say it doesn't really matter what I think. I know what the science says. I know what works for most people, but it doesn't really matter what I think. What matters is what actually works for you in real life. Okay. All right. Here, when I mentioned inclusion earlier, this is the reality, right? You don't need to be disciplined 90, 100% of the time with what you eat. 20% of your food should be fun, what Alan Aragon calls discretionary, okay? You may have heard the phrase cheat meal. We could debate whether or not that's a healthy way to talk about things or not. I don't love the phrase cheat meal, but the reality is that if you want to be really, really super fit and healthy, like me, for example, you don't need to do it much more than 80% of the time. Let me show you something here, okay? This is a document that you will have access to after the webinar. And I'm not going to show you the whole thing because it's many, many pages, but this will show you the cost of getting lean, right? Everybody wants to know, Matt, what does it take to have six-pack abs? Okay, well, this document is going to show you that. And I'm just going to scroll down to the first 2 or 3 examples, okay? So here you see a picture of unhealthy people, which at this level of body fat, almost no athletes are for comparison. And you see what these people who have high levels of body fat typically do is eat lots of these things, and they don't do too much of these things. But what does it take to move from this red unhealthy zone into the first tier, the next tier down, which is starting to be healthy, right? And by the way, this goes all the way down to professional athlete level, and the six-pack abs. So what does it take to move just from this tier here, which is basically obese, into the next tier? It doesn't take much. Look, I'll zoom in a little bit. It says here, eating slowly until at 60% of your meals, doing a few of these basic things 3 times a week, most meals, not even every meal during the day, 1 or 2 meals a day. Just eat a little bit less of that, right? It doesn't say take away all the alcohol, take away all the dessert. That's not what this says. If you can do that, and I know you can, move from these kinds of average habits to these, you start to get out of the danger zone, okay? And of course, you can do more and more and get leaner and leaner, but it doesn't take much to move from step 1 to step 2. Okay. So you will have that entire PDF as one of the bonuses from this webinar. Let's move on. Okay. Now, let's get into the holiday portion of the lesson. I kept this slide really simple on purpose. We eat food at meals with people, with family. Okay. So, what am I talking about here? Sounds obvious, right? Sounds simple, but we forget that sometimes, right? So, food is mostly talked about out there in social media or whatever circles you probably talk about food in out of context. But the reality is that we eat food at meals with people and often family. Okay. So all of that matters, right? Like what you eat, how you feel when you eat, the stories that come that we tell ourselves about food over the years. We're going to get into this deeper as we move forward. That's all a part of the equation. And that's why Thanksgiving and other holidays can be emotional when it comes to food because the food itself doesn't have the emotions you do. Building on that, we were all kids at one time. Many of us have kids and we've led lives, right? So we grew up loving or hating certain foods, more emotion there, right? We have positive and negative memories around foods, right? You hated the vegetables on your plate, or you loved eating the pasta out of the sink, or you loved the cookies that your grandmother used to make, right? This is real. This is where we really get into the real deal about food, right? Everybody knows what healthy food is. You really don't need me to tell you what healthy food is, to be honest, right? You can Google that. You know what vegetables are, right? Okay. What you need me for is to dig into this and uncover what's blocking you from, getting from level 1 to level 2 and so forth, getting from where you are now to where you want to be, getting through this holiday without freaking out. Okay. So moving on. What is your food story, right? So now we start to think about this. There's a story that you tell yourself, most likely in your head, about Thanksgiving. If you're on this webinar, you're here because you want to know how not to fear Thanksgiving. So you've got a story in your head about it. Does it mean that every year at Thanksgiving you just go home feeling like you're gonna, need to be pushed in a cart? Does it mean you're gonna feel really guilty after Thanksgiving because you wanted to have all the stuff on the table with the marshmallows and the chocolate and you had a couple of drinks? Does it mean you're going to feel compelled to eat some of those things because you're in front of certain people or because you had a reputation for doing so in the past, but you really don't want to anymore, but you're going to maybe do it anyway? Just some examples. Everyone's story is unique. That's the beautiful part about what I do, is that I really get to listen to your individual stories. But what is your food story? Start to think about what your food story is. Getting a chat here. We can't see it. We can't see it. So, don't share your entire screen or just share a different tab or window instead. Let's see if we can fix that real quick. I'll take a pause. So you are currently sharing your screen. Hey, thanks for popping in with the chat, Evan. Let me see if I can fix. You missed. I hope you didn't miss all those slides. Let me see if I can try another way, and then we'll get back to the presentation. You're going to get the slides after the webinar, but let's just try this instead. Let me know. Can you see this slide now, Gav? Oh, it was the PDF. Okay, you can see everything. Okay, all right, got it. Okay, very good, very good. Okay, so quick, sorry for the pause. You could see the slides, but you couldn't see the PDF I showed. Understood. Don't worry, you're going to get that by email. All good. Slight technical delay. Let's go back to sharing the tab. And boom. Excellent. Okay. So we talked about your food story. Well, this year's story hasn't been written yet. Good news. Okay. Just because you've done something before, even if it's for 10, 20, 30, 40 years before, it doesn't mean you have to do it again this year. Okay. You can start writing a new story, and you're actually doing so right now by being here. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about what you can control and what you can't control. You might not be able to control what's being cooked in some cases. All right. But you can control for sure your actions, your mindset, and your effort. And you may have some control over, what's good. This wasn't created just for Thanksgiving, this particular graphic, but there are some things you have no control over, like maybe where you're going to eat, but there are some things you have total control over, like how you respond to it. And there are some things in between, like, you know, maybe who you talk to about how you want this day to go. Okay. All right. Let's get into some food principles, some real food stuff here. Um, these are going to help you, just from a food perspective, navigate this holiday season. Okay. There are 4 here, and I'll pop them in one at a time. Okay. Number one, I talked a lot earlier about, by the way, there's no one diet that works for everyone, individuality, consistency. These are the principles, right? Even though it's true that there is no one diet that works for everyone, there are some solid principles that pretty much apply to everyone because they've been proven to do so. And here's 4 of them. Okay. So the energy balance equation is true. Okay. Many people understand or have heard about calories in, calories out. And so basically, if you eat more than you expend in energy, you're going to gain weight, and vice versa, right? That's very, very simple, okay, in theory, but it is not simple in practice. Okay. That's why if it were that simple, we wouldn't be on this phone call. We wouldn't have an obesity problem. Okay. So everybody knows that if you eat too much, you're going to gain weight. But the problem is that many people don't know how to execute that. And that's what we're going to get into right now. So what do you take away from this solid principle? It's true. You should know that it's true that if you can get your calorie, if you're looking to lose weight or maintain, if you're looking to lose or maintain weight, how much you eat actually matters. That is true. Okay. But what doesn't necessarily really matter in the long game is just the one day of what you're going to eat in the case of Thanksgiving, or even the 1 week over maybe the Christmas holiday. In the long game, that doesn't really matter. That doesn't really matter. Not in the long game. Okay. What really matters is your average consistency with this equation over many days, many weeks, and many months. Okay. So you can take comfort in the fact that this Thanksgiving is not going to break or ruin anything. Mathematically, scientifically speaking, this equation that everybody talks about, just eat less, doesn't apply to just one day. It's about every day. Okay. All right. Principle number 2, protein is king. I know that this is coming a little small. Don't worry. You're going to get this. You're going to get this. I'm having trouble zooming in right now. I could zoom in like that. Okay. So great. So protein is king, right? So calories first. Number 2, protein, right? Next most important thing to know about food is that getting adequate protein is important. Most people don't eat enough of it. It's very satiating, difficult to overeat. When you get your protein right, everything else begins to fall into place. So you have this entire presentation available to you after the call. If you want to refer back to this list about which you should probably eat more often and which less, but it doesn't mean never. You can have a protein bar. Probably just shouldn't be your go-to primary option, right? Another food principle: fiber is beneficial. Now, there's definitely some stuff out there. People who are touting the you should never eat fiber, position. That's just kind of a little bit irresponsible. Yes, for some people, too much fiber can irritate their stomach, but so some people need less than others. But generally speaking, having some fibers, fruits, and vegetables in your diet is a good thing. Okay. When you combine this with number 1 and 2, right? Total caloric intake on average on most days, doing well, adequate protein almost every day. Then you're having adequate fiber pretty much every day. Then you're really rocking and rolling, moving forward towards your weight goals. When you get those 3 things into place, and carbohydrates, they're just not the enemy. Okay. I want to read you this whole thing. I don't want to be too boring, but cutting the carbs, and sugar is more addictive than cocaine. And, the glucose goddess is out there, telling you that you can't have any sugar in your blood, which is not true. Because if that was the case, you would be dead. A lot of that anti-sugar stuff is taken way out of context, right? Carbohydrates can be a part of a healthy diet. In fact, trying to remove carbohydrates altogether can be dangerous, very dangerous. So, the notion that you can never have a piece of fruit or a cookie is frankly ridiculous. Yes, you can eat too many carbs, but you can also eat the right amount. And here's another list of good carb options. Okay. And check back here. Any messages in the chat just to see how we're doing. Yep, slides back in action. Good. Okay. So there's 4 solid food principles. Whoops. And now, if you were to take those into dinner, you'd be in really good shape, but I'm going to show you how. Okay. Ways to regulate eating behavior. Okay. So I talked earlier about the food story and the equation and the emotions and this and everything that goes into Thanksgiving dinner. Okay. Then I mentioned these food principles, but now we're going to start to tie it all together. Okay. What matters is actually what happens when you sit down at the table this holiday. Okay. So if you don't want to go egregiously over on your calories for that day, even though it's only one day, that's cool. I support that. Okay. So this is how you do that. Okay. So let's go. Eating behavior is one of the top skills that I coach people on. This list is for you. You're going to have it after the call. These are just some ideas. Actually, there are many, many more. I didn't want to make a list of 50 ideas long, but you can use a meal timer, meaning in this case, it would be make sure that you take at least a certain amount of time to eat your food, right? So don't eat your entire Thanksgiving meal in 3 minutes, right? So there are some ways to do that. You can use your phone. You can put your fork down after every bite. You can take a little sip of water after every bite. This one is one of my favorites. You can pace yourself to the slowest eater at the table. Often it's a child. It's funny because children, pretty much they're smarter than us. If there's someone at your table this holiday that's like eating really slow, you don't even have to say anything, tell anything to anybody what you're doing. Just try to keep pace with that person. Okay. Let's go down this slide a little bit more. Some of the benefits of eating slowly. Okay. Automatically, you're going to see this going back to here. Principle number 1, calories in, calories out. Mindful eating isn't because I want you to be like John Kabat-Zinn or some kind of Zen master, right? It's because it's going to help lower your calories, right? You automatically, when you eat slow, eat less, and you're probably going to hydrate more. And another little graphic here, by the way, you can screenshot these and put them on your phone if you want. I know that's another idea, bring them to the table with you. How to achieve 80% full. You never really want to be 100% full. That's probably too much. So here's a few tips for that. Like if you start eating faster, if you sigh, right, then that means that you're probably full. It's actually a physiological response, right? If you're not able to walk after a meal, if you're feeling like you're not going to be able to get up and walk, that means it's time to stop eating, right? Okay. All right. So regulate eating behaviors was a big one. Let's talk about emotional eating. Okay. This is my favorite picture in the whole deck, the crying baby, crying child. We are all emotional, and that's a good thing. Okay. We are emotional beings. And during holidays, though, however, emotions tend to run high. Okay. That's also a good thing. And what I mean by that is Paul Chek has this theory, this philosophy called the pain teacher, right? So when we go home for the holidays or have family for the holidays, a lot of times there's a lot of emotional stuff, right? Because within family, because we love each other, there's often tension or fights or history, right? So that can be an emotional time for many. There's something to learn from that. That's what the pain teacher means. I have a link here if you want to learn more about that. It's a great podcast, so you have that option. So if there's something that's really bothering you deeply about this holidays, then you can start to reframe that too as an opportunity. Okay, but with that said, knowing that we're all emotional, knowing that it's going to be could be a bit hotter when we have our holiday coming up, a bit higher. The availability of certain foods, like the ones that are pictured here, plus your elevated stress level, That's not a great combination for some people. That's why we're doing this webinar. Okay. That can lead to emotional eating, which is a big thing. I could do a whole hour on emotional eating. We're not going to do that. We're getting close to the end of the deck now, just so you know. We'll leave some time for questions, but I don't want to go deep into a lecture on emotional eating. What I want to give you is some tools. I want to give you some tools. If you have, we're all emotional eaters, all right? We all are. But if you struggle with this, one of these 6 things might help. Okay. So I have this in chronological order: before, during, and after. Right. Call ahead. What do I mean by call ahead? Okay. Dr. John Berardi's first law of food is, if there's food available, you are going to eat it. He is the founder of Precision Nutrition, one of the schools I went to. Simple rule. He's a doctor. He's a smart guy. He founded an awesome nutrition school. That's his first law of food. Okay. So if there's food available, especially food that looks like that, you're probably going to eat it. Okay. So you could, if you're not hosting, call ahead and say, hey, Mary, can you maybe put out a healthy option in addition to the cake? Can you maybe not put the cake right in front of me when you serve it, right? There's many ways to go about this, right? So you can call ahead to the restaurant that you're going to and make sure they have something that you will be actually likely to grab, right? So you can do a fair bit of planning ahead of time, even now, even though Thanksgiving is 3 days from now. Adding in, hang on, let me take a sip of water. Adding in. Apologies if that font's a little small, but I'll just tell you, adding in is what I do with almost all of my clients in the beginning. Okay. It's also known as crowding out, right? So most people who have a lot of weight to lose, I'm not saying that's you, may or may not be, but typically they are lacking something in their diet, like protein, vegetables, fiber, or fruit, or all of the above. Okay. So by adding more of these foods in, what happens is it crowds out cravings. So we're talking about emotional eating right now. So basically what I'm telling you is, if you sit down to dinner and there's going to be a dessert plate like spread at the end that you don't really want to feel too tempted to indulge in, okay, I support that. Have as much of the whole food as you can at the meal preceding, for example, during the dinner portion. Or even going one step further, if you're not thrilled with what's going to be on the table at dinner, have a big lunch, right? So the more that you fill yourself up on, healthier foods, like some of the ones I pictured earlier, the more you're going to crowd out the desire for tempting foods. Okay. Okay. Now let's get into this one. HALT. If you really struggle with emotional eating, remember this acronym, HALT. Hungry, angry, lonely, tired. Okay. And before you pick up that fork or spoon or grab that slice or whatever it is, right? Just ask yourself, remember HALT. That's all you have to remember in your head. But for this conversation, HALT means, am I hungry, angry, lonely, or tired? And if you can take 10 seconds or even 2 seconds to pause before you take that bite and realize that, you're actually just kind of lonely right now, or like you're just tired, or maybe you are actually hungry, right? But at least if you make that second to check in, that can be a big one. Okay. Slow is safe. Okay. I want you to give yourself permission to eat anything you want, going back to inclusion, one of the 4 key pillars, slowly. Okay. Like I told you in the beginning, for most people, being blanket restrictions just don't work because they are almost impossible to adhere to forever. Eventually, it's like telling a child, right? We are children all inside on some level, at one level or another, emotionally, and even if it's down at our very base, even if we're very evolved, when someone tells you can't have something, you want it even more, right? So try flipping the script on that. Okay, I can have X, Y, or Z as long as I eat it slowly. And then you can use some of those tips that are in the other graphic there for doing that, chewing it 20 times, for example. You'll enjoy it more too. Mid-dinner, you can take a break, right? So a lot of these meals, depending on your setting, are 2, 3, 4 hours long, and there's multiple courses, and there's TV in between, and you have some flexibility to get up from the table. But maybe you don't, maybe you do, maybe you don't. But if you can go outside, if you can play with the little kids, if you can make a phone call, excuse yourself from the table, hide in the bathroom for 5 minutes, whatever it is, if you're feeling an emotional eating trigger or something coming on, take a break. Okay. And then the last one is feedback, only feedback. Okay. So there is no such thing as failure. There is only feedback. That's one of my core principles, right? So in my practice, we have a tool. I don't think you'll be able to see this if I pop it open in a new window, but we use a tool like this. I'm going to give you this tool. You can download it using the links that you'll get in the email. And this would be like a post evaluate, like a post episode, worksheet, right? So if you go to have Thanksgiving dinner this weekend or this week or anytime in the future, and you have an emotional eating event that really bothers you, well, then what you need to do is, that's okay. Don't beat yourself. Don't beat yourself up about it too much. Do this worksheet instead, right? You can even send me a message and I'll help you work through it. It's pretty simple though. And it chronicles what was going on. What were you thinking, doing, feeling, and doing that morning leading up to the event, afterwards. And what happens is you raise the awareness of what was actually happening with your emotions. And once you become aware of something, that's the first step, right? So if you need to break an emotional eating cycle, this is a great tool. Okay. I think we only have 3 more slides left, so we're getting close to the end, almost at the Q&A here. Self-compassion. Okay. Self-compassion is giving yourself a break, being kind to yourself, being honest, and seeing the big picture. Okay. Now, I know I've been framing everything in a super positive way. That's my style, and it's true. But it doesn't mean that there's no accountability either, right? I'm not saying you can eat cookies all day long every day without consequences. I never said that. What I am saying is that you can have a cookie, especially if it's intentional, right? Especially if you eat it slowly, right? But it doesn't mean you have a license to be undisciplined all the time. I didn't say that, right? But you should be, no matter what, compassionate for yourself, right? So compassion includes both accountability and giving yourself a break. So it's both. It's a little bit of both. Okay. What did one other little graphic here I didn't want to miss. Negative self-talk. Okay. I am a real stickler for negative self-talk. I have a list of curse words that I don't let clients use, like words like TRY and BUT and SHOUD. So the thing about negative self-talk is a little bit like what we talked before about, writing a story inside your head. It's really powerful. So if you feel bad and then you eat something and then you talk to yourself in a negative way, well, guess what's going to happen next, right? You're just going to feel even worse. So you can change this. This is a cycle that can be broken. I've done it for myself and I've helped others as well. So how can you change this? Well, I think this might be my favorite slide in the deck. How we talk to ourselves really, really matters, as I just said, okay? And you can start to change the language. So I just went with the cookie example here. You can see left and right? Many of you may be speaking to yourself with this kind of language, okay? I shouldn't eat this. If I eat this, then I'll be off track. I always cave. I'm a failure, okay? None of that is actually true. You can start to change the language inside your head, start to change your mind in order to change your body, okay? So, like I said, there's no such thing as a good or a bad food. It's just a cookie, right? Or insert your food of choice, right? You have a choice about whether you can eat it or not. You're not going to break anything, okay? It's normal to want to have a cookie. And even if you do eat 10 cookies on Thanksgiving dinner and Thanksgiving, you can start fresh again the next morning, okay? It's just part of the journey. All right, what else? Got you a little bonus. I want to make sure we leave some time for Q&A. Bonus document here that will be emailed to you. potatoes. So let's zoom in here. White potatoes versus sweet potatoes. Does it matter? Are they good or bad? Well, by now you should know the answer to that. They're just potatoes. But this is a fun document, really good one, that just kind of breaks down. It's really not even necessary to know any of this stuff, but it does break down some of the myths about potatoes. Okay, that's a fun one. And actually, for those of you who couldn't see the other slide, I'll just give you a quick sneak preview to the one slide that you couldn't see before. That was here. Where'd that go? That was up here. Sorry, this one. Oh no, that's no. No, not able to get the view. All right, you'll get that in the email. The cost of getting lean. Okay, let me stop the screen share for a minute. Whoo, guys, can't believe that was 43 full minutes. I kind of thought I'd be able to get it in half an hour, but if you're still here, thank you. And it's open for questions. If anybody has a question, pop it in the chat, pop it in the question box. But before we wrap, or before anybody asks questions, I just want to say thank you for being here. Really appreciate it. I hope you found this valuable. And if you have any specific questions that you can't get to now on the webinar or you think of later, just hit me up. Okay, we got a question from Gavin. How long does it take to transition from one category to another by slightly changing their eating? Okay, so in that graphic that I tried to show you, that basically showed the movement from roughly about 5% body fat or so from going from say 30+% body fat down to 25, then down to 20 and 15 and so forth. So moving from stage to stage. It depends where you're starting from, first of all, but roughly speaking, someone can lose about a pound. Let's see. Let me make sure I get this right. I should know this, but I have it in my notes. But you can lose about half a pound of body fat per week, and that's very, very easy and sustainable to do. Now, you can lose more than half a pound of body fat per week. You can lose a pound of body fat per week also. Or even 2 pounds of body fat per week. That's 4 times as many as the first number I said. But the 2 pounds a week is very, very aggressive, right? And almost never recommended, right? And then there are other diets out there, like crash diets, that actually lose more than 2 pounds of body fat per week. And then we're getting into very, very extreme. So just to color that in with a little more practical advice, what's reasonable and comfortable is typically more effective, almost always. And there are many studies showing this, which is about maybe a pound of body fat per week. So that equates to 1 to 2 pounds per month of body fat. Ideally, you're going to, depending on where you're starting from, you don't want to lose too much muscle while you're losing fat. But you will probably lose some, which is normal and okay. But if you're in the reasonable type of program, if you're in an extreme type of program that's like super low calorie, like almost like starving, or very, very restrictive, those tend to have worse side effects, like more muscle loss as well. And more importantly than that, those type of programs don't teach sustainable eating habits, right? So this is a great question, by the way, I could go on for an hour about it, so I'll just wrap it up. But if you find yourself on a program that's telling you that you're going to lose 2 pounds a week or 3 pounds a week or 10 pounds in a month or 20 pounds in 2 months, watch out. Okay, watch out, because while it may be possible, it is possible. How are you going to sustain that, right? So I would ask whoever's selling you that program, how is this going to teach me how to sustain my how to eat for my life? I asked them that question. I would ask. And listen, I know I got a little serious there for a minute, but I'm open to whatever will work. So if I believe my own principles that I told you in the beginning about individuality and flexibility and consistency, if such a program will work for you, and not harm you, then I would support it, right? So for some people, for a very small group of people, a super aggressive program actually can work. But that's not most people, to be honest. And for many people, it can be quite dangerous and lead to some serious problems, emotional stress and physical. No problem. Okay. All right. We'll pause a minute. Anybody have any other questions? Cool. Okay. So, guys, thank you again. Thank you for joining. I really appreciate it. Yeah, you're going to get an email from me with the follow up, all the documents, and I appreciate you. Have a great holiday and happy Thanksgiving.